Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allan, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Laura Frayling. Today marks the 107th anniversary of the capture of the village of Pozières. In the early hours of the 23rd of July 1916, under the cover of a carefully fired artillery barrage, troops of the Australian 1st Division launched an attack on the fortified French village of Pozières. Australian troops entered the village and after hours of bitter fighting were able to eject the Germans who had held the village since the earliest months of the war. One man described how the instant our guns lifted, the German batteries and machine guns which had been waiting opened fire on us and a torrent of high explosive shrapnel and bullets were let loose. Men fell in all directions, but nothing could stop the boys now that their blood was up. Into the trench, they dashed and bayoneted and shot like fury. The capture of Pozières was the beginning of a 6-week campaign that saw 3 Australian divisions rotate in and out of the line, conducting attack after attack along the Pozières Ridge. Slowly, they advanced towards the fortified stronghold of Mouquet Farm under some of the heaviest artillery fire of the war. By the time the Australians were relieved from the battlefield on the 3rd of September 1916, they had advanced a little over a mile from Pozières at a cost of 24,000 casualties, 6,731 of which were dead. Australian troops fell more thickly on this ridge than on any other battlefield of the war. Today, we pay our respects to those commemorated on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, the memorial would like to acknowledge and welcome contingents from the United States Navy ship, the USS Canberra, and from the Royal Australian Navy's HMAS Canberra. Yesterday, the USS Canberra was formally commissioned into the United States Navy at a ceremony held at Fleet Base East in Sydney. Canberra is the first US Navy warship to be commissioned in an Allied country. Forged in the Second World War, a lasting bond of comradeship and cooperation between the two Allied navies began at the Battle of Savo Island, where on the 9th of August 1942, the original HMAS Canberra was sunk while protecting the US Marine Corps landings on Guadalcanal Island. In 1943, a new US Navy cruiser was renamed USS Canberra in honour of the lost Australian ship. That tradition continues today with the current HMAS Canberra and the United States Navy newest ship, USS Canberra. We are honoured to acknowledge Vice Admiral Mark Hammond, Chief of Navy, Royal Australian Navy. The Honourable Senator Maurice Payne. Rear Admiral Kevin Smith, United States Navy, Program Executive Officer for Unmanned and Small Combatants. Captain Mark Crawford, Commodore of the United States Navy, Littoral Combat Ship Squadron 1. Commander Bobby Barber, Commanding Officer of the USS Canberra Gold Crew and the accompanying members of the ship's Blue and Gold Crews. And Captain Brendan O'Hara, Commanding Officer of HMAS Canberra and the accompanying members of the ship's crew. We warmly welcome Mr. John King, President of the Return and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Myrton Trangmar Allan. Myrton Allan was born on the 24th of July, 1892, in Woolwich, New South Wales. The eldest of 4 sons, born to public servant and civil engineer, Percy Allan and his wife, Alice. Myrton received his education at St. Illinois College and later at St. Ignatius College, where he was a member of the rowing team and senior cadet program. He went on to become a trainee lawyer and was articled to Messrs. Spark and Millard in Newcastle. He later returned to Sydney and joined the law firm Messrs. A keen sportsman, he began playing rugby union and enjoyed sailing at Sydney Harbour. In March of 1915, Myrton became a qualified solicitor, having completed several years of training. With the war demand increasing numbers of men, he decided to leave his new career behind and enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 20th Battalion and began training with his new unit near Liverpool. In August, he applied for a commission which was granted in December. Now a second lieutenant, he embarked for Egypt at the end of the month, travelling on board the troop ship Suevik. By the time Allan and his comrades arrived in Egypt in early 1916, the Gallipoli campaign had drawn to a close. Months of fighting had failed to gain any real ground, resulting in the evacuation of thousands of troops. After further training in Egypt, Second Lieutenant Allan embarked for the Western Front on the 27th of March 1916. After a long week voyage, he arrived in the French port city of Marseille. From there, he was sent to the Franco-Belgian border, which had once been the site of bitter fighting, but was now comparatively quiet. He was taken on the strength of the 20th Battalion in April and entered the front lines near the village of Armentières. Here, the 20th Battalion became the first Australian unit to be raided by the Germans. Allan later wrote to his father, describing the raid. "I saw a bomb coming and we ducked, and then a shell, and we slipped into the shelter of one of the bays in the front trench. After that, they lifted the lid of Hades. Bombs, rifle grenades, shells, coal boxes, weary willies and whiz-bangs were all bursting at once. They made some noise, but the thing that impressed me the most was the tearing, rending sound they made, like gigantic hail tearing along before a 1,000-mile-an-hour gale through an orchard. Our division reckons we got more shells that night than they got the whole time at Gallipoli." After this, Allan's unit undertook routine training, trench maintenance, and duty in the front lines. In July, the 20th Battalion was moved to the Somme, where Australian units were involved in bitter fighting around the village of Pozières. Allan was promoted to lieutenant before heading into the front lines on the 25th of July. The next day, he and his comrades attacked enemy positions. As they jumped over the parapets, they came under heavy fire and were caught on lengths of uncut barbed wire. The 20th Battalion began taking heaving losses. Those who made it into enemy trenches were forced to withdraw soon after. In a few hours of fighting, the battalion had suffered over 200 casualties. Among the dead were Lieutenant Myrton Allan, who died of wounds received during the advance, 3 days after his 24th birthday. One of his comrades wrote to Allan's father, "Your eldest son died of gunshot wounds in the jaw in the 6th Australian Field Ambulance on the 27th of July. I find he was regarded as a very gallant officer, full of courage and initiative, and that he had a fine future before him. Unfortunately, these are the sorts of chaps that we are losing, and Australia will be forever poorer for such losses." Lieutenant Myrton Allan was buried the following day at Bucor Military Cemetery, where he remains today. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Myrton Trangmar Allan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Everybody, present arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Everybody, shoulder arms. Everybody, inward and everybody, quick and
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.